Good morning and welcome into the Illini Inquirer podcast live here on our YouTube channel. I'm Jeremy Werner. That's Joey Wagner, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. Allen Trieu is with us. He's going to join us very shortly. We're recording this on Thursday after one of the best recruiting days of the Bret Bielema era. As within an hour and 5 miles of each other, 3-star Chicago brother Rice defensive lineman King Liggins and 4-star Chicago Morgan Park wide receiver / defensive back Nasir Rankin commit to the Illini. And the Illini added a JUCO defensive back and Donovan Turner just about an hour later. Joey, you were at Brother Rice yesterday. I was at Morgan Park. So we got you fully covered at IlliniInquirer.com with insight from Liggins, Rankin, their parents, coaches. Got full-blown analysis there, all on one site, which you can get access to for just $1 for your first month. We know most of you are VIP members. We appreciate you. But if you're not, try it all out for $1 for your first month. Joey, a big day for Illinois football. And you have certain moments, days that we look back on recruiting. I remember driving down to St. Louis for Isaiah Williams, Luke Altmaier when we were in Tampa. There's certain moments where you feel like this could change a program. Wednesday certainly felt like a big moment, right? A moment for Bret Bielema's program and getting not one, but two of Chicago's best prospects within an hour of each other and both announcing live on 24/7 Sports. So what'd you think of that day?
Yeah, it was a really big day for Bret Bielema and the Illinois program. It showed that Illinois is we've seen it in spurts, right? And Illinois certainly got top talent during Bret Bielema's tenure with Malik Elzy, Caden Fagan, Aiden Lawfrey. But to go in and within an hour of each other get two top 20 kids in the state of Illinois from Chicago who were heavy battles, right? I mean, they were heavy recruiting battles to get those guys. Illinois is turning into, or it's become, a viable place that you can win football games and you can go to the NFL. And that hasn't been the case. There's been NFL players, but Illinois hasn't won. So you're combining those two things, and we'll get into, Jeremy, both those individual recruitments over the course of this pod, but I think this staff is just kind of the same theme from the two of those guys yesterday. Just a real approach, right? They're not running out the bells and whistles and trying to make them think they're going to come in here and be day one starters. If that happens, great. But I just think it's a real approach by this coaching staff, and that resonates more than I think a lot of people recognize it in the NIL era. And Illinois does a really good job of it.
Yeah, you're not just selling hope or immediate starting job. You're actually selling like, hey, you can win games here and you can go to the NFL here. Well, let's bring in Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. Allen, you were all over this the last couple of weeks, but what a big day for Illinois. So just what's your immediate takeaway for Illini fans here?
Yeah, immediate takeaway is obviously, you can't overstate how fantastic it is to pick up two players of this caliber and they're inside your home state, and you keep schools from outside of your home state. I mean, I wrote this yesterday. It seems like such a long time ago that we had a class that Illinois didn't even have an in-state kid sign. And that's quickly been washed away by this staff. And it doesn't just happen by accident. It doesn't happen overnight. They've done a good job. And other schools are really coming in here hard. The state of Illinois has continued to be recruited very heavily. So, it shouldn't be overlooked that you beat out Wisconsin for King Liggins. I think they had him, honestly. And you stay diligent on that one and you turn it around at the last second. So I think it's a huge day. It should be celebrated. I mean, you get two, and then even the coverage of it for Illinois to get two back-to-back commits on our airwaves. I mean, that's cool. It doesn't happen a lot. It hasn't happened before. So I said to Illinois fans, definitely enjoy the day.
Yeah, it's something that needs to happen more often of winning these. And you're right. Like, you think of moments, not signing one in the class of 2020, I believe it was, or 2019. Like, that felt like a terrible moment for Lovie Smith's program. Now you have 6 that are in the top 25, but Nasir Rankin is one of the best in-state prospects they've gotten. You can go back to Aaron Bailey, was very good. I think it was higher in the composite rankings, not 24/7 Sports, but you gotta go back really to Terry Hawthorne. I think to get a commitment of this magnitude. So what did Illinois do well in adding Nasir Rankin, and what does he bring to the program, Allen?
Yeah, so first, in doing well, I mean, I think they recruited him hard from the start, and we're gonna talk about the two-way thing with basketball. I think they would have gotten him, honestly, without the basketball stuff too. I think that's how good the football staff did. So I don't want people to think, especially outside of Illinois, to think, well, they offered him in basketball, that's why he went there. I don't think that necessarily was a huge factor in it. I think it helps, but I think he was going to go to Illinois with or without that to play football. So with him, I mean, you just don't have that many guys who can average over 20 points a game will be 4 years of varsity in the Chicago Public League, that quite frankly, he's not a 6'3", 6'4" plus kind of guy. To do the things he does on the football field and on the basketball court at 5'11", like that's a special athlete and a special competitor. And I think we've seen that when I went to see him play. I mean, he was playing DB, he was housing punts, he was making plays out of the slot. So anytime you put this guy in a competitive situation, whether it's basketball, whether it's football on offense, football on defense, football as a punt returner, he ends up finding a way to get it done. And I just think that can't be. I don't want to get too. I'm going to throw this name out there. Cooper DeJean was like that. He was a great basketball player, played every position on the field. And he only had 2 offers, and people questioned, well, is he this enough, that enough, plays smaller competition? And at some point, if you just get it done every time there's a ball in your hands, whether it's a football or basketball, that tends to translate. I think that about Nasir.
Yeah, Alan, King Liggins, I was up at Brother Rice. He's a big guy, and his story is kind of what Illinois football is, right? He was a developmental kid from that freshman year onto his senior year, has added the weight, plays for a really good program. What do you think about him? And he feels to me like a high floor guy. Like you really know what you're going to get out of King Liggins.
Yeah, high floor, I think, is very accurate, especially when you talk to his coaches, and they just can't say enough about the way he's approached things and the way that he goes about it. I mean, they went as far as to say, this is before I even knew where he's going. They said, whether he goes to Illinois or Wisconsin, he's going to be a captain at one of those 2 schools. But I think on the field too, I've seen where you just can't, it's hard to find interior defensive line body types, especially up here. You usually got to go down into the Southeast or Texas to find those kind of body types. We've seen in Illinois do that, and other classes have to go outside the region. So when you have one at home, and there've been a couple the last few years, you got to keep those guys. And I've seen that even in the NFL draft last couple of years, where Kenneth Grant from Merrillville, Indiana gets drafted in the first round. Derek Harmon from Detroit gets drafted in the first round. We don't have a high volume of them up here, but they tend to turn out. So whenever there's a big guy with this type of athleticism and versatility and approach, like, these guys tend to turn out. So I'm an advocate for keeping an eye on King Liggins over the course of this season, rankings wise, because these are the type of dudes that I think tend to make it.
I do want to ask you broadly about this defensive line recruiting class. 3, no doubt, Power 5 guys. What do you think of who they added in this class with Parker Krim and Tony Belonganai? And then probably the last 2 recruiting classes, it feels like Terrence Jamison is really stacking them up after some misses early on in his tenure at Illinois.
Yeah. So first, huge kudos for pronouncing Tony's last name without even a hiccup. That was very smooth. And I think it's great. I mean, first of all, I think even just to take him as a defensive lineman, we had looked at him as an offensive lineman for most of the process. A lot of schools had. And then when Jeremy mentioned, like, hey, I think he can play D-line, and like, it was like, oh yeah, I can see that, and so I think when you add several guys there that have versatility, and I think in at least when it comes to Parker and King, like, huge production in high school too. Again, like I said with Nasir, at some point, if you just do it when the lights are on consistently, I think you're going to continue to do that at the next level. So we can overvalue traits and measurables and things like that at some point if you just produce. And I think Terrence Jamison's done a fantastic job, but I think it's the value of also being able to show kids what you've done. And he's developed some guys that were not top end recruits. And I think when they see that, it makes a huge difference. And so I think he's now able to go out and sell that. Really, from everything that I've heard, really just a down to earth, good, personable guy. So when you have that, but you also have, like, hey, I had a couple of guys who didn't have a ton of offers, weren't necessarily the highest ranked. They're going to be playing on Sundays. I don't think you can overstate the importance of being able to sell that on the trail.
Yeah, Alan, I think the same kind of the wide receiver position with Illinois. Illinois did have a pretty good run there of Regis Ben, AJ Jenkins, even guys like Steve Hull and Mike Dudek and Malik Turner, Geronimo Allison were here. But then the quarterback position went downhill. The wide receiver position went downhill. But George McDonald and Justin Stepp have gotten the most out of guys that they had in Casey Washington and Pat Bryant, Isaiah Williams. And now you have a class that includes Nasir Rankin. I'm a big fan of Kenyon Alston out of Orlando, and then Davon Grant out of DeKalb, Illinois, all different types of players. So what do you think about how those guys can all complement each other, and how do you kind of project that room moving forward with those guys, Malik Elzy and everything they've added there?
Yeah, I'm with you. And I think in general, and this is probably a Brett Bielema thing throughout his career, always been a huge development guy. And so he himself also has this history of seeming to find recruits that maybe just were a little bit under recruited, a little bit undervalued, or maybe he was able to move a position or this and that, and just have a lot of success with guys who maybe it was a little bit harder to predict that future success than in other places. And so you have that as well. And I think that's happening at wide receiver with the room. I mean, I think the way that I've seen Illinois play offense and the way offenses are going, especially in the Big Ten, you can't have a samey type of wide receiver room, right? You need to be able to throw a lot of different looks at people and have a lot of different, and having so I can't speak as much to Alston because I haven't seen him, but just saw Davon Grant at Under Armour, Ohio, and talk about just a whale of an athlete at his size. I mean, and I was able to see some of the testing results, and he can really move and change directions and do some things with his body at that size that not a lot of guys have. And then you come with that with a guy like Nasir, who I think will fit probably more as a slot, but could play some outside also, but a guy who can make some things happen after the catch. So you kind of got to defend this big jump ball guy in Grant. And then you've got a guy who can catch a short pass and make your entire secondary miss on the way to the end zone in Nasir. And maybe you motion him around, jet sweep him. There's a lot of things you can do with a guy like that. So as I'm looking at the room, I think it looks very purposefully put together with some guys who have complementary skill sets.
There's so much excitement, Alan. Right now, Illinois has the number 8 recruiting class in the country. Now, we all know that'll come down as the powerhouses fill up, but this is on pace to be their best recruiting class in almost, a decade and a half here. 2009, I think, was the last top 30 class that they had. So now everybody's getting greedy. They want to know what's next. And 2 4-star tight ends in this class from downstate Illinois. We talk a lot about J.C. Anderson just because of how that recruitment has gone. I don't know if we should talk more about Max Suter, given the SEC suitors could be difficult here. But what do you think of the Illini's chances, or what do you kind of look forward to with this recruiting class next for the Illini?
Yeah, so I think, I think I've said on this show before, I think of the two, JC is the much more likely option. And I still think that. And I'm starting to feel like Illinois is probably the leader there. And I've felt that throughout. I'm starting to feel it more. And then he added North Carolina back into his official visit schedule. And there's, obviously some excitement around that program. And Bill Belichick also has a great history with tight ends. And so that visit will be interesting to get through. But going into official visit season, I think Illinois is the team to beat for JC. And so I still have, that's you add him to the class. That's massive. With Mac, I would say that one's probably trending out of state, maybe even out of region at this point. I don't know that he ends up playing football in the Midwest. A lot more to be determined with him. As far as the rest of the class, I think that there is some serious potential for this to close even stronger. And then you said that the ranking will come down. I think that it will, but that doesn't mean that they can't, that this won't stay as a really good class. And I think some of the guys that are still on the board, like a Messiah Tilson, I think could end up even ranked higher than where he's at. Nelson Wheeler, the running back they just offered. You look at a guy that runs 10-7, I would have to think he's a prime candidate to eventually move up the rankings. You can pick up a couple of those guys, Jacob Eberhardt, who has some ties to Illinois. I think he would be a fantastic get. So there's definitely still some meat on the bone to where you can keep this class pretty high, even as those other schools catch up.
I was going to ask you about Nick Hankins as well, taking an official visit here. You mentioned Eberhard as well. Like those two recruitments I'm really interested in because, as you know, Al, like when you get into St. Louis, that becomes SEC territory. And Illinois has gotten in there. Lovie Smith actually did that really, really well. But Brett Bielema, Thad Ward, even Archie McDaniel are trying to get back in there. So those are two recruitments I'm interested to watch throughout the summer for Illinois.
Yeah, should have mentioned Hankins as well. I mean, Illinois is going to get an OV there. I think they're right there with them. When you start to get into Missouri, and they're kids that Mizzou wants, Mizzou does, I think, a really good job in recruiting. They do. I mean, I've talked about earlier about just not being able, schools not being able to just walk into the state of Illinois and pull guys out of Illinois. It's the same thing in Missouri. Like if you come in there, even Jackson Cantwell left the state to go to Miami recently, 5-star, but they really, I mean, Mizzou battles right to the end on all of those guys. And just the spade to spade, this is what we're dealing with in college football these days. Mizzou does a really good job on NIL, and especially with the in-state kids, and some of the state laws have recently helped with that, I think. And so those guys, I have to, Mizzou's not just going to go away lying down. So I think if there is a biggest threat to Illinois in those recruitments, especially with Hankins, to Mizzou, I think Mizzou knows that at least on Hankins, they're going to have to battle Illinois. With Eberhard, that thing's gotten fairly national now. So there's going to be some out of region schools like Florida State and such who have something to say about that one. So his is interesting, but with Mizzou, it's always a tough pull on those guys. And so would love to win both of those. Obviously, Illinois had some success in that area before, but when they had some success in St. Louis, I don't think Mizzou was had built the fence quite as much as they have now under Eli Drinkwitz. And obviously NIL wasn't a factor at that time either.
Alan, I do want to ask, of the commits that Illinois has now, who are you looking at as candidates for a rating bump? As obviously senior year production is going to matter, camp circuit's coming up, but who are some guys you have your eye on who can move up that list?
Yeah, so I think King is going to be one of the first because, like I said, those D tackle body types, it's so valuable at every level now. And when you look at the portal too, the guys I think that are really getting the most portal interest, and sometimes honestly, even undeserved portal interest, schools are just like, give me a defensive tackle. I don't care if he had 5 tackles last year. We just want an interior body. That position is so valuable now at all levels. And you saw that this year in the NFL draft, where even if you're not a true tackle, but you can shade inside, so many of those guys are going first 3 rounds. And so King is one. I mentioned Davon Grant having tested really well, got some athleticism and some traits that I don't think are that they're just traits that other guys don't have in the Midwest. And so I think he's one. I think Jacob Alexander's one to watch a little bit. I mean, I think for us, it was hard to exactly peg him. Like, what is he going to be? What is he going to do? He's standing up with a body type that looks like he could go interior. I think he's really taken some of that feedback to heart. I see some of the training. Like, he's like, I'm staying at edge. I'm doing explosion training. I'm leaning out a little bit. The stuff I've seen of him this offseason looks great. So Jacob Alexander is another one. Those would be my first couple. I mean, Tony's another one. He's been hard for us to evaluate because of sort of the position ambiguity and the fact that he just hasn't, I don't think he's been to anything that we've been able to see him at. So we have less information to work on with him. And so he's another one. When you have some missing pieces, I think those big guys, at least in the Midwest where we've missed, or when I watch the draft and I'm like, man, we should have had that one or that one. It's usually with the trenches. And so those are the guys that I would kind of spotlight as we need to keep an eye on these dudes.
And the guy who does this every day, I was going to ask you, like, what is the hardest at the high school level to evaluate? And is it those trenches just because of the level of competition? You don't get to see them. I feel like it's more important to see those guys up close, but what would you say to that, Alan? Like, what is the hardest for you?
Actually, I think the line is starting to get easier because it's such a traits valued position that if you got guys that are underweight but have great athletic backgrounds and have, frame and some athletic traits, those guys are probably going to turn out. And so those are, and you can tell on film a little bit if they play physically. for me, the harder positions are starting to become like, well, quarterback is one because it's such a processing position. It's one of where, because of the way some of these high schools play offenses, you don't know how a guy's going to it's such a developmental position that to try to grade a guy at 15, 16 years old on what they're going to become, it's really hard. And we're not in their heads. NFL teams are able to get these guys on chalkboards and things and really do a lot of poking and prodding on them that we don't get to do. And the NFL teams still get it wrong all the time. And so quarterback is difficult, I think, because of that. Like offensive line, defensive line. All right, this guy's 6'6", 270, runs of this, plays basketball, throws shot. Like that guy's probably going to turn out. You don't have some of those same markers that you can point to at quarterback. Cornerback can be a little bit tough too, because those guys don't get challenged at the high school level. So you're trying to go off of other things. You're trying to go off of receiver film to see if they have ball skills. You're trying to see if they run track, so you know if they can run. But you don't get a lot of film against similar competition to where you see those guys challenged. So I actually think cornerback is a little bit of a tough position to, and with Illinois, it's like Tony Adams turned out, we knew we liked him, but it was hard still. Quinion Mitchell, who Corey Parker had coached, it's like, I don't know, could anybody have seen that coming? So I actually think corner is, for me, becoming a hard position to evaluate.
Great stuff. Allen Trieu, you're the goods man, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. Thanks for the time as always, and always appreciate the insight, man. Always appreciate the insight.
Yeah, it's great to be able to talk to you guys. Hopefully we'll be able to keep doing this. Seems like we will.
Great stuff. Allen Trieu, 24/7 Sports national recruiting analyst. Joey, always appreciate his insights, and he's always fantastic when he jumps on with us. Anything stand out there for you in the conversation with Allen?
It's nice to talk to Allen. We didn't talk to him for a little bit, and Brett Bielema comes in, and we're talking to Allen a lot more. I'm really interested in just the defensive line. Maybe it's I'm biased. I was there at Brother Rice yesterday, but I really like what Terrence Jamison has done. And I thought Allen's point of, hey, finding some defensive linemen like that in the Midwest is challenging. And if you look up and down the Illinois defensive line room, it is very Midwest heavy. And they weren't, not all those guys with the highest ranked guys had a ton of offers. You think of like a Jeremiah Warren, who you and I think very, very highly of and think he's going to be a key part of the rotation. He wasn't some sort of massive Power 4 recruiting win. I know we like Angelo McCollum and Demetrius John, but the way that group has turned out, I mean, it wasn't long ago, Jeremy, that we sat on this pod and it's like, they're missing on guys. And we talked about, hey, there's not enough quality Power 4 defensive linemen to fit the need. And Allen backed that up as well. And Terrence Jamison's getting those guys. And I think this is a really intriguing class to this point. And I'd imagine we'll see if there's another defensive lineman added, but I think it's a pretty good class as it stands. And I don't know that there'll be another one in the mix.
I know I belabor this point, but I just want to reset it because I always think the perspective of these things is really, really important. Illinois had one defensive line recruit between the classes of 2021 and 2022. Now you had a fired coach and an incoming coach, right, in those 2 years, but they did not sign one in Brett Bielema's first recruiting class. The next year, they signed 3 guys in Jeremiah Warren, Pat Farrell, Alex Bray, who have all contributed at Illinois, and Bray transfers out, but Warren and Farrell are going to be part of the rotation this year. Neither of those guys had another Power 4 offer, right? But then the class of 2024, Angelo McCollum, Demetrius John, and I take out Eddie Turk now because he's in the offensive line. Those guys between them had 9 Power 4 offers. So that's an improvement, right? 4.5 per guy. Last year, Cameron Brooks, Isaiah White, great gets for both of them. Cameron Brooks, Chicago area kid from Homeward Flossmoor, Isaiah White out of Indianapolis, 15 Power 4 offers, so 7.5 between them. This year, Joey, they've upped it again. 12 Power 4 offers average between Liggins, Bologna, and Krim. And Bologna and Liggins, 2 in-state kids that could have gone basically anywhere in the Big Ten. I think it shows the sell of Johnny Newton. It shows the sell of all the nose tackles. They're getting to the next level, though most of these guys are 3 techniques or 4-eye guys. But it just shows like the credibility that they have. And I go back to missing on Roderick Pierce and Jamel Howard. Felt like they recruited those guys the same way they recruited Liggins and Bologna. It's just now you have way more sell with Johnny Newton and the winning that you're doing.
Yeah, I think Roderick Pierce, Trey Pierce was a heck of a lot closer than maybe we realized. So Jamel Howard really with Wisconsin. So they were right there. But as you mentioned, now that sell has greatly improved. I thought Allen nailed it when talking about Terrence Jamison. He's not a guy who's going to, overhype his guys to us. I mean, he's excited about his players. I'm not trying to say he's not, but he's not making Heisman campaigns for all of his guys, right? And I don't get the sense he does that in recruiting.
When you listen to a Terrence Jamison interview, people don't come away the way they do with Corey Parker or Aaron Henry.
Sure.
Like you're in a room with
there's a lot there, though.
Yes. No, those guys are going to own the room, right? It's just their energy is through the roof. JMO is more laid back, but his approach, the way he teaches, and Joey, you've done a great job of illustrating this with some of the stories you've written about him. It's just everything is so detail oriented with him, and he gets the most out of his guys. At the end of the day, he might not be the most entertaining teacher to people, but he's a heck of a teacher, right? And he's had a heck of a room, and that's why he's one of the better defensive line coaches, in my opinion, in the country. I don't think most people would disagree with that. So that comes through, and it's starting to come through in recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, we say that, so we're not trying to paint Terrence Jamison. When he recruited Dennis Briggs, they're in a room, Dennis Briggs says, and they're going through the whole. So, I mean, it's not like the guy doesn't have a fiery side, but and talking with King Liggins and his family, I just got the sense that they were very comfortable with Terrence Jamison. They really connected on that level of just understanding each other, understanding where Terrence Jamison could take King Liggins and really where King Liggins could help take Illinois, right? I mean, it's a two-way street. So credit to Terrence Jamison and Brett Bielema and that Illinois coaching staff on getting that done. Because to Allen's point, this was a hectic couple weeks, and really you can zoom in probably to a hectic 4 or 5 days in landing King Liggins' recruitment and getting him on board and keeping him in state. I mean, Wisconsin was right there. Illinois, I mean, I'm trying to think of the best analogy, but they hit the gas in that final stretch and ended up, let's say, a kick in the 400. It's getting to be track season. They did a heck of a job closing that out when Wisconsin looked like it was really the favorite for him.
A week ago. Like when they took Parker Krim, I was like, oh, Wisconsin's probably going to get King Liggins because they play the same position. So I thought Illinois was making a move on another guy to make sure they got and locked up a position, a guy they wanted to, but they didn't quit. They didn't quit in this recruitment and found a way to sell it. And I don't think, like you said, Joe, it wasn't like a bunch of NIL or a bunch of this. It was, we feel we are the best place to develop you into what you want to be. Wisconsin's the same distance from home as Illinois for him, but I think it's pretty good to have in your back pocket. You're going to go to Wisconsin? Well, why did these 3 Wisconsin guys just transfer to us? Because they feel it's a better chance to play in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would use that if I were Brett Bielema and Terrence Jamison and in my recruiting pitch. And the vibe I got, just to be clear, I don't want to sound like we're some sort of homers dogging Wisconsin. I don't know that it was anything Wisconsin did or didn't do. I think Illinois just really, really did an excellent job of closing the gap, taking the lead, and earning the commitment. That was kind of the feeling I got leaving Brother Rice yesterday. Was this wasn't some, Wisconsin tripped over itself in the home stretch. Illinois just did an excellent job, and that home visit on Sunday was King Liggins told me it was really, really meaningful. He ultimately calls Illinois Tuesday night, says, "Hey, I'm in," and then his dad didn't sleep because you're going live to the world on Wednesday afternoon. So just a crazy that's recruiting, right? And Illinois did a good job of closing that down and being a part of that race. There's been times when Illinois, even if they were in the lead, and you could even point at times in early on before these wins started piling up for Brett Bielema, where other teams were the ones closing that leg and ending up winning the recruitment. So just a different. Before we get any further, Jeremy, just being a viable option for everything at this point is so huge. I know we talk about it a lot, but I don't want it to go overlooked, right? You're not selling, come turn the program. It's come push it forward.
Yeah.
We're a good program now is what the pitch is. Push it forward. And hey, by the way, we'll get you to the NFL too. Here's a laundry list of draft picks we have.
Yeah. And the great thing with King Liggins is like, Nasir Rankin, you offered first, right? You were in there first. You pushed first. You were the priority first. That wasn't the case with King Liggins. Wisconsin offered before Illinois. Iowa offered before Illinois. And they didn't offer until January. But then they get him on campus for 3 visits. They still recruited him hard, though, right? Like they gotten him on campus to work out, and then they offer him like 6-7 months later, but they're still able to get him. Like that doesn't happen before. Like, so the fact that you can, play a recruitment right, like Nasir Rankin, but also take your time in your evaluation with a guy like King Liggins and still land him. Again, it's another sign of how far they've come. I take people behind the scenes, Joey. Like, you go into these announcements or commitments, and we want to talk to the people around them, and we have an idea of what we want to write. I scratched mine with Nasir Rankin. Like I told you, I want to talk about him embracing being the Chicago guy, the first guy in a long time, top 100 prospect to pick Illinois and kind of embrace the pressure that comes with that. Io DeSumo was there, right? And he was one of the guys that did that for Illinois basketball and got a good quote out of him. But talking with him, talking with his dad and Nasir Rankin, it was more about like they picked Illinois. I mean, yeah, basketball was a little part of it because he wanted to do that. But Nebraska, Duke, USC had offered them a chance to do that. The opportunity to play both ways. If, he excels at receiver, play a little bit of defensive back because he wants to do that. But it's at Illinois he felt was the best place for all of those things. That he felt Illinois was the best place to get him to the NFL. Illinois was the best place to potentially let him play on either side of the ball, both sides of the ball. And Illinois was the best place to potentially be part of a basketball program. I have my doubts of whether he can actually pull all that stuff off, but he is wired so he wants to do this. And Illinois has embraced that, Joey. They've given him the opportunity. But also, like you look at USC, you look at Nebraska, Duke, North Carolina, Illinois now probably has the best football cell of a lot of those places with the wide receivers and the NFL guys. They have produced basketball. If he just wants to sit at the end of the bench for a program, Illinois basketball is a pretty good place to do that if you want to go to the NCAA tournament and stuff like that. So that's what stuck out to me in talking with them, but also the way that they were able to connect with him, the way they sell themselves. Like we talk about their official visits. One of the most important things they do is they meet with these prospects and break down the film of how they're going to be used. They put film, Jameson did with King Liggins, and spliced film up with him and Johnny Newton. That's a really smart way of doing things and showing him how he's similar, how he's going to be used. But Nasir Rankin, they used a lot of Isaiah Williams clips, but they also showed him you're not just in the slot. Like we can put you out in a matchup here on the perimeter, get you open this way. We can use you in all these creative ways. They said no other program did that. It was most like, oh, you're going to play the slot. Like Illinois spelled it out, showed him, broke it up the clips. Like that was really meaningful for him. So that's what stuck out to me about Nas. Because obviously the story everyone wants to read today is about how the top kid in Chicago picked Illinois. And that's part of the story. But really, it was just more about this program for the number 2 prospect in the state made the most sense for him.
Yeah, the program grew up, right? And became an option where, yeah, as Allen said, I'm glad Allen mentioned that. It wasn't just, hey, come sit on the basketball bench, be a part of the basketball team that made Nasir Rankin say, okay, I'm in. It was football program's good. They know how to use talent. They've done it before with similar body types with Isaiah Williams. The football pitch makes sense. And we've talked about it, Jeremy, on here quite a bit. Illinois at every step of the way, and we similar with Tony Belonganai, they met Nasir Rankin where he was. Hey, we're going to recruit you as a defensive back. What's that? You'd be interested in wide receiver? Here's Justin Stepp, right? It's every which way they go, or every which decision Nasir Rankin made. Illinois said, yeah, that's good. We'll go where you want to go. What's that? You're interested in basketball? Okay. And Brad Underwood offers him a spot like that. You don't have to do that, right? If you don't really believe in someone's talent and someone's ability to do all of those things, you can just say, well, I'll tell you what, go see if you can find somewhere that'll let you do that. But no, you let the kid dream big. And that's really meaningful for kids who want to dream big. We can talk about how practical or difficult it's going to be for him to do everything that he wants to do. And it's a big list, playing both sides of the ball. He's going to start at receiver, and I think Illinois will let him progress as he is able to progress, maybe on that defensive side of the ball. And playing basketball at the same time is really difficult because if your football program's good, which is a pitch to Nasir Rankin, well, all of a sudden you're playing deep into December, and your basketball season's 2 months, or January, and your basketball season's 2 months old, and then you got winter conditioning and you've got spring practices. But figure that out when the time comes. Let him dream big, and I think Illinois did a really good job of that. And we'll see how it all plays out. I don't know that anyone's got the definitive answers other than to say, hey, it's tough, and not everyone can do it. But I don't know on May 22nd, 2025, we can say yes or no. But they're going to let him figure it out, let him give it a chance.
Yeah, and to a lesser extent, they've done this with guys like Eddie Turk. Wanted to start at defensive line, so he began his career at defensive line. A year into it, they're like, all right, let's put you at offensive line. Like he knew that was going to be potentially a spot for him, but he wanted to try defensive line first. And now he's back at offensive line, and he could be crashing the 2 deep in his first season on the offensive line. Check it out.
Can we also say real quick, like Isaiah Williams, they gave him that first spring to be a quarterback. And then it was like the very end, it's like, hey, you do realize wide receivers the road. Now he's with the Bengals. Like they've given guys a chance. Jershawn Newton, give him a chance to come in at quarterback, see how it goes. So I think Illinois has done a good job of meeting guys where they want to be. And if it doesn't work, they're not going to insist it works, right? They'll have the conversations and kind of pivot where they need to pivot. And I think that's meaningful.
Check it out here on our YouTube channel. If you got questions, you can send those in. Super chats, we'll get to those as well. Is Nasir really going to play basketball? Is there an open spot for Riley if he becomes available? Got to make this a basketball podcast. I do not think Will Riley is coming back to college. Nasir, is he going to play basketball? Listen, Nasir's a really good high school basketball player. He's a Division I prospect, Northern Illinois and Eastern Illinois had offered. He's 6 foot. He is really athletic. But 6 foot point guard in the Big Ten could be difficult to play that. Is he going to play basketball? Maybe get some spot minutes at the end of games, if that's potentially, if he is on the basketball team, Joey. But there's not many guys doing this anymore. There's not many Charlie Wards anymore. The amount of time that these guys have to put in to be football players. There's no offseason where these guys take 4 months off of football anymore. It's right into winter conditioning. It's right into spring practice. Maybe Bielema lets him not do that for a year or something like that, where he doesn't have to do winter workouts and he goes and plays basketball and practices with them. But it's very difficult. Like Keon Coleman played basketball at Michigan State, 10 minutes in 6 games, and Illinois is loaded, man. Like Illinois basketball is just absolutely loaded at this. So I think it's gonna be really tough for him to do it. But could I see him pulling a Keon Coleman thing where he joins the program for a month or two and gets into a game? That'd be a fun story. Do I see him being a contributor to Illinois basketball? No, not in the sense of playing significant minutes, but it's a cool story and he's a good enough athlete and he wants to be a part of it. I think that's what Nasir wants, is he wants to be a part of a basketball program, and we'll see how he pulls it off. It's gonna be fun to watch.
Yeah, and look, when it gets time in your development, you realize maybe where your future checks are going to come from, and that's for Nasie Rankin is like, this is going to be the NFL before it's going to be the NBA. You're going to go all the way in on that and what that can be. But I think it's cool the kid wants to try. Like, I think that's really cool. Like, you can cross the practicality bridge when you get there, but for him to want to try, be athletic enough to reasonably try to be a part of it, that's really cool. And just real quick on Will Riley, look at the rest of the roster. Where does Will Riley, like, they didn't build this roster with the Will Riley sized hole in it. I mean, they have built the roster with the idea that he's going.
And there's plenty of people that, like in the early 2000s, like Julius Peppers, St. Dom. What's up, St. Dom? You're happy today. Donovan McNabb played football and basketball at Syracuse. Yeah, that happened. It just doesn't happen that often anymore. Like Tony Gonzalez, Terrell Owens did this. It doesn't happen very often anymore. And even the playing both sides of the football is hard. Like you got to be the elite of the elite, like Travis Hunter, Champ Bailey, Charles Woodson, to pull it off. And I don't know if anybody ever is going to do what Travis Hunter did playing both sides of the ball, but can you find a way to be like a Champ Bailey or Charles Woodson where you work in a package here or there? Yeah, potentially. You could do something like that, but this kid has big goals. And I love that Illinois is not just, poo-pooing him and saying, yeah, we'll give you the opportunity to do it. Master wide receiver first, then you get a chance maybe to play a little bit of DB, some returner, and maybe we'll give you a couple months to play some basketball as well.
Yeah, everything you said. And I just think when you look at the way the calendar has evolved in college athletics, as you said, right now, I think guys are probably maybe back home or have some 4 weeks of free time, 4 weeks.
Yeah.
In May, like that doesn't open the door for a lot of other ventures. But again, don't tamper a kid's dreams. I mean, meet him where he needs to meet him until it becomes impossible to meet. And I just think it's really cool that Illinois has done that and opened the door for that.
This all felt like, just to put a bow on this this all felt like a culmination of everything with Brett Bielema, right? The winning, the development with the NFL, and really just the in-state outreach, right? The first day he gets the job, he calls Mark Grounds, the then the Coaches Association president here in the state. The staff calls everybody. They try to get to every high school. Listen, it just feels like a culmination of all of those things, Joey. And it's a kudos to Brett Bielema and his staff for succeeding on the field and pushing this program forward. And now that recruits see that, in-state recruits especially, it's a big step forward where you can get guys like Nasir. You can get guys, and I don't want to overlook King Liggins and Jacob Alexander and Tony Belongni, but obviously Nasir is a different level of prospect that you're getting in here. So that makes you think, like, what if they get JC Anderson too? Like this would be one of those classes that we look back on, and maybe not everybody works out, but it's like, oh, they started recruiting like Ron Zook again, only Brett Bielema on the field and game management wise and all those things. And maybe even staff hires is another level than what Ron Zook was.
Yeah, we should also say, and I know you know this, and I know this, but they've had big in-state moments before yesterday. I mean, significant moments. I think there were probably some double dip recruitments. If I'm thinking back, there's a day or two that come into my mind. I'm drawing a blank on names where it's like they get so-and-so 1 hour and so-and-so the next hour. Usually that's OP season.
Those official visits weekends, you can have like 3 or 4 in 1 week. Yeah. And obviously earlier in this cycle, you had the 2 Florida kids, Almirian Thomas and Tony Williams on the same day.
Yeah. So, I mean, they've had really significant moments. But to your point, think back to one of the first videos the football social media account posted when Brett Bielema was hired was him on the phone with high school coaches. I remember, I know you remember this. And Ryan Easterling is good with maps and computers, and I know you are very clearly not in terms of the Docs Google. That I've got like 4 texts about that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm glad, man.
It's great. It's great. But remember, we mapped out like, okay, they're tweeting out the regions of the state of Illinois that they're recruiting. I remember Andy Boo was part of Southern Illinois, and okay, here's how Chicago is all divided up between. This was the original coaching staff, and Ryan's on the map, kind of drawing out all of his markers, but it was a way to keep relationships and build relationships, really, or reestablish them in a lot of ways in places where maybe some coaches had history before or not. And like all of those building blocks have really been a part of these last couple of years, especially in terms of the level of talent you're bringing in the state of Illinois. And then they've won football games. And that was like the missing piece. We knew the relationships were there. We knew that Illinois put in the miles to go to these high schools, to have guys in camps, to turn over rocks to find Matt Krasetich. To Casey Toman wasn't very difficult to find given how big he is at the position he plays, but to go to Olney and get him, like all of those things were part of it. Then you put the winning on top of it and the NFL draft picks on top of it. And now, you don't have to go far from home. It's probably Illinois' pitch to come in and win football games and help push this program over the edge and into that college football playoff spot.
Yeah, and it was really important that they take advantage of this momentum, right, on the field, because this is obviously the 26 class is mostly built off the 24 season. I think back to the 2022 season, the 24 class was really what you built off of, and it was solid. It was a solid class. But, Tyshawn Griffin and Eddie Turk were your top in-state prospects in that class. They were 19 and 24. Like, this feels different, that they are taking more advantage of it. And having 2 8+ win seasons in 3 years certainly helps that. Having as many NFL draft picks as they've had certainly helps that. But, the sell is obviously resonating a little bit more. And you keep winning games, you keep having winning seasons and great seasons like last year. And then you can add even more and more of them. So, huge day for Illinois football. And now they got official visit season coming up and plenty of momentum to sell to all of them, right? I mean, you have all these official visitors, a bunch of commits that'll be on campus for June 6th, and you're going after guys like Nick Hankins and Tucker Ashford, and edge rusher out of Texas, AJ Marks, corner out of IMG Academy, who's from Detroit, Nelson Wheeler, running back out of Nebraska, Will Vala, a tight end out of Downers Grove North. I think Illinois would take 2 tight ends in this class. So a huge official visit weekend in a couple of weeks here, Joey, where you can try and keep that momentum. And I mean, Illinois got 16 commitments already. I think this is going to be a bigger class, like 22 plus, I would think. But man, you filled up most of your huge needs, and now you're looking at a couple more offensive linemen, edge rusher, a couple more DBs, and obviously swinging big for these tight ends.
Yeah, and to catch people up, right now Illinois has 4 of the top 20 in the state of Illinois, 6 of the top 25 in the state of Illinois. And as you mentioned, J.C. Anderson is still sitting out there. As we talked with Allen about, Nick Hankins is still sitting out there as 2 uncommitted prospects. So there's still a lot of talent out there, Jeremy, that Illinois could really make a bigger splash. But big official, it is different seeing Illinois have most of its class, or a lot of its class, settled before it's June 1st and that wave of official visits, but still a lot of talent that they have ready to come into Champaign, and we know they do a good job on those official visits. That's another thing that's been proven over Brett Bielema's tenure, and whether it's the film cut-ups that you've talked about, the player panel that they've talked about and that we've heard has really resonated with recruits and with parents. Well, big month of June ahead, but it is different to see their class really established at this point.
Yeah, and I do want to mention Jacob Eberhardt again. His father, who passed away, played at Illinois in the late 90s, early 2000s. Illinois, Alabama, Missouri. He really is the top 7. I think Oregon's in there. Like, he's got a ridiculous amount of offers. The 2 guys I don't want to overlook are the 4-star offensive linemen. Like Micah Smith, they went and visited. Kai Pritchard, they've been in his top group. I think Rutgers is the team you're chasing there. But offensive line still sneaky big need in this class. Like Casey Tolman and Landon Von Segren are really good additions so far, but they would love to continue to upgrade and win some bigger prep battles on the offensive line, right? So Micah Smith, they're in really well with. It's just he's got offers from other powerhouses. Kai Pritchard doesn't seem as difficult of a competitive, guys that you're going up against with Boston College, Rutgers, and some of these other programs. But Rutgers, obviously being his home state school, being from New Jersey, could be difficult. But those are 2 I don't want to overlook, because I know they already took their official visits, but they're taking official visits elsewhere this month, and they'll make decisions, obviously, probably this summer.
Yeah, and we've seen that Illinois is still continuing to push. They did a home visit for Micah Smith, and if they're doing that home visit, it tells me they're getting feedback that the window is still open. I don't know how significantly it's open, but it's open enough to get him on campus for an official visit, to be receptive to taking some time to having them in his house. So yeah, that is a need. We talk about offensive line. Owen Force is still out there in the recruiting process. I don't know that. We'll see where that goes, but they are very much in the mix for those 2 4-star linemen, and that would be a big get for Bart Miller, for Barry Lunny, for Brett Bielema.
Yeah, Owen Forrest has been just a quiet recruitment. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing. Like, there's been some guys like Cameron Brooks who are just quiet for a while, and then they take an official visit, and it wraps up pretty quickly. But Illinois, a bunch of Big Ten programs in on the kid from Barrington as well. Getting off the exit after being in Chicago yesterday, and they got another one. Donovan Turner, a 2025 JUCO corner, played his first few years at UMass. Transferred to Long Beach City College. He's a Long Beach, California native. Had a really great year there. He was committed to Delaware State, an FCS program, when Illinois Assistant Director of Player Personnel John Proto came across his film and said, "I like this guy." And I can see what he likes. He's 6'1", 190, really physical in run support, long. Reminds me of Caleb Patterson. It
That's
reminds
exactly
me
what I was going to say.
almost like a carbon copy of Caleb Patterson, which is nice to have a backup like that. And I know people corner secondary. We did our position rankings. We had secondary number 1, and we feel really good about corner, especially the top 3. But I think what we got to remember with this staff, they're trying to make a college football playoff, and they've had injuries at corner the last few years. So if they feel they can upgrade their experience, their talent for that single season ahead, they're going to try and upgrade depth. So I think Turner could potentially be in the 2 deep. He'll be fighting for that spot with guys like Tanner Heckel, Amar Reynolds, Vernon Woodward, Tyler Strain. I think Strain's probably nickel, but all of that, Joey, like, you force more competition, you get more depth, you cover up potentially what could happen with attrition with the injuries. So I think there's going to be more roster spots than they originally thought than the 105 with the settlement that still has got to be passed here. It sounds like there will be more roster spots kind of grandfathered in to this. makes sense to me. Keep upgrading, keep trying to add to your roster. They've done that throughout the spring with offensive line, tight end, specialists, and now the secondary to make sure that if they have an injury, they have somebody else who's ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely. The depth piece, that was one of our bigger questions. That's where the defense is, by the way. One of our bigger questions out of spring ball was who's the fourth cornerback. Tells me, one, that Tyler Strain is probably in the nickel. I need to see where Vernon Woodward ends up in fall camp, because I know you saw him, Jeremy, during a spring practice with the safeties. I had it confirmed to me that he was with the safeties. Now, could that be nickel? We know nickel practices with the safety. So I don't know that he's that outside corner, at least right now. Maybe that changes in fall camp. That just want some clarity, because he's a really talented kid. I'd like to see where he ultimately lines up. But, that to your point, leaves Tanner Heckel or an Amar Reynolds, two guys who are talented but young. And as you said, if injuries hit, you're trying to make that college football playoff. More depth is important for Illinois to get where it wants to go, and not having to shoehorn a redshirt, or Heckel would be a sophomore at this point, but Amar Reynolds, the redshirt freshman, into a really big spot. So, yeah, it makes all the sense in the world, especially as that 105 number for roster limit seems to be very flexible coming out of whenever this House settlement gets passed. So I think, and you've talked about this before, I think 2023 was jarring. It was eye-opening. I don't think Brett Bielema ever wants to get back to that point where you're thin on the offensive line, you're thin in the secondary, you're relying on younger guys to step into bigger roles, especially where this program is now and where it wants to be. Load up, make competition, make everyone better. I know Corey Parker also, he's talked about this on the record, likes to have 4 or 5 corners who, obviously everyone likes to have that, but he's shown that he'll rotate cornerbacks in and out of there based on matchups, and having another guy who's very Caleb Patterson-like going in there and able to contribute minutes that's important if Illinois wants to be where it wants to be.
That 2023 season was pretty scarring for the staff, and it should be, because it felt like some of the issues from that year, you knew they weren't going to be as good in the secondary. You knew they were going to have growing pains at quarterback, but some of their issues were self-inflicted, roster stuff, right? Not going to get more offensive linemen, not kind of reading that was Zach Crystal really an offensive tackle, not having enough depth at cornerback to where you had to throw some of those guys to the wolves that season. Linebacker, were you athletic enough? Like all those things, like felt like they could have done more in the offseason to upgrade. They have not left those questions the last few years. Because think about last year, one of the big reasons they got to 10 wins was they had injuries at linebacker. They had injuries at corner and in other positions, Joey, but they had the depth to where the drop-off was minimal, right? Compared to the drop-off in 2023 to some of these positions was absolutely massive.
Yeah, absolutely. Not only do they have injuries at corner, they had a marquee portal addition just not work out at all in Terrence Brooks, and they were able to go to a Caleb Patterson, to a Torrey Cox, to a Jaheim Clark. That is such an interesting corners group. I can't wait till position preview time, Jeremy, to talk more about that group. But yeah, that is what at Illinois, like they've had. You've seen it play out in the NFL where the top end talent was good enough to get to that next level. And you can go back and look at whether it's UDFAs or drafted players. Illinois has had guys go on to the NFL, but then it was the depth. And I think you said the portal helps you address that, right? We talked about the defensive line having 1 signee in 2 consecutive classes. It's why Illinois has gone so heavily to the transfer portal to bridge that gap. And now that depth, as we talk about, you've got this collection of younger talent who has been in the system, who's ready to step in, and eventually you don't need that portal bridge as much as they have at certain positions over the course of the last couple of years.
Yeah, the spring portal is always fascinating to me, but you look back on it, obviously Terrence Brooks and Zachary Franklin were the headliners, and Zachary more than lived up to the hype. Most receptions on the team last year, which kind of gets overlooked. Terrence Brooks obviously did not. But Torrey Cox was a massive addition. That's just a huge addition. And they did it again this year of adding an extra tight end, but Carson Goda ended up being very important to them. Like when they added Goda, I'm like, they need another tight end. And they ended up needing another tight end because Henry Boyer wasn't quite ready to take on the huge role and was more similar to Arkin. And then Cole Russ gets hurt. And you needed another guy that could just be a capable player for you, and he was. So I like adding Christian Abney. You already had Tanner Arkin, Davin Stoffel healthy for the spring. Cole Rusk, I saw him and Luke Altmaier throwing the ball around down south on Instagram, and it's nice to see Cole Rusk back at it. But you could have an injury there, and you're like, oh, who do we play? Is Tanner Hollinger ready? So I like how they've kind of used that spring portal, and obviously this one they added a lot to the offensive line and getting Tyler McMillan, Nathan Knappich, adding some depth there where you can force some competition. And the guy like Tyler McMillan could come up huge if you have an injury or two, or even if somebody doesn't perform as well, whether it's Brendan Henderson or Brandon Hanson, whoever it is.
Yeah, not necessarily no doubt starters, but guys this staff sees the traits in, and whether they're younger or maybe more experienced at the FCS level, or Carson Goto is Division II. Yeah, Division II. And think that they can get something out of them for that final year, or they can really mold a Nathan Knappich into your eventual left tackle. So very much a depth piece in the portal. And I think if you look around, that had been the case for a lot. Like your Miamis of the world went nuts in the portal in that spring window, right? But I think a lot of schools, if you use that for depth. Hey, what didn't we like in spring ball? Where do we feel like we need another body or two at these positions? And Illinois is, kind of gone maybe under the radar in some spaces on that, but they've added guys that they believe in physically who can come in and either push into too deep or just be available as needed.
Yeah, and a kickoff specialist, a backup kicker, and a backup punter as well, right? They went dressed where they needed. I'm just happy I can use some Lars gifts from heavyweights. Joey doesn't watch movies, so he's never seen it. But one of the great ancillary characters in a kid's 90s movie, Lars, love it. But yeah, they needed to find some backups and some potential long-term options at both kicker and punter, and they've done it. So kudos to them. Marcus did tweet out, when is the last time Illinois sold out their allotment of season tickets? I don't know that specific thing. I think Illinois said the first time in at least 20 years that they have sold this many season tickets and sold out their allotment of public season tickets. 43,000 season tickets for the opener against Western Illinois. And they're going to have single game tickets, the mini game plans, all there. That's before all of that goes on for sale. So, Joey, there's going to be multiple sellouts this season of mostly Illinois fans. You're not counting on Nebraska fans or something like that to come in, but that's what you want to see. Like, that's why Brett Bielema is getting the raise and the extension that he is, because you got to get butts in those seats. It's so important for your program, especially in this revenue sharing era we're about to enter. It's just massive. You got to fill that stadium. And I've been at way too many games where they felt like there was 10,000 actual people in the stand. So the fact that Illinois got it to this place right now is awesome. And now you got to make the most of that crowd. Now you got to keep winning games. And it's never easy when you got the target on your back. I'm sure we'll have conversations about all of that. But the response from this fan base, man, you have awoken potentially a sleeping giant here in the Big Ten. Now you got to go out and win those games to continue to sustain that success. But the Illinois football fan base has always been there because the Illini fan base has always been there. Now it's showing up, and because you're giving them reasons to show up.
Yeah, I've always gotten this sense that Illinois fans want to jump on board, but what has been really the reason beyond October to pay money to go to games and be there? You talk about 10,000 fans. It's almost like every Northwestern game. It's that after Thanksgiving, the weather's usually not good. Both programs, either Northwestern was good and Illinois was really, really bad, or both programs weren't very good. And their 10,000 might have been a generous estimate at some of those games. I also think real quickly, Jeremy, before we get out of here, they know that they've got to make this on the field. Of course, you've got to make this a good experience. You've got to win games. You've got to keep this momentum. But Josh Whitman's there's also that proposal out there to fix the Wi-Fi at Memorial Stadium, right? Like, you've got to also make this an enjoyable experience unrelated to what happens on the field for fans. And Wi-Fi was a complaint that we had saw and heard quite a bit, that, hey, this is really hard to communicate with anyone other than, within 3 rows of me during a football game. And I get a lot of people's attentions are on the game, but you still want to have access to everything else. So they're putting in, money to make it a better fan experience. And I think as they get more fans, and they've realized what's been missing, what needs to be fixed, amended, whatever. And I think that's significant as well.
And to wrap this all up, what helps recruiting is when you have great environments at football games, right? It was a lot of times they would put off getting players on campus until after the season because they didn't want them showing up to an empty Memorial Stadium. It wasn't just about the losses. It was just the vibe there. Compared to, you go to Wisconsin, you're part of Jump Around with 70,000 people. You go to Iowa and you got the wave and all the great things that happen at that stadium. You go to Nebraska and it's sold out with 90,000 plus people. Like, now you can bring them to a game where there's excitement on the field, but like the fans are also there going crazy. And it's one of the best tailgatings. I think it's the best tailgating in the Big Ten with the lots around Grange Grove and all of that. So that's another part of recruiting, get these fan bases involved. And Nasir told me yesterday, he goes, that fan base is crazy. They've been with me the whole way. They've been wanting me, and I can't wait to play in front of them. So that's a part of this recruiting pitch as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned the tailgating because I think the space, just the sheer volume of space, is as good as any in the Big Ten. And I'm excited to see what that looks like in the fall. That first Friday night game of Labor Day weekend, I would imagine, is going to be a really cool atmosphere in the stadium, around the stadium. It's different, man. It is. It's a different Illinois football program than 2 years ago, 3 years ago, definitely beyond 3 years ago.
Three Lefts content. For the first time since Makovic, Illinois is a guy who can coach and recruit and manage a program and has an AD that believes in him. And yeah, he'll be here for a fifth year, unlike Makovic, who left for Texas. Like, Brett Bielema sees that he can do it at Illinois, and Josh Whitman is a big part of that. And St. Dom had one more. I don't need Illinois football to be Ohio State, but we can be Iowa football, winning at least 8 games or more every season and going to a bowl game. Yeah, people have been annoyed. I don't know how many, but a couple people have commented, like, why does Illinois always say, like, Iowa is the goal? Well, if you looked at Iowa in the Kirk Ferentz era, they have 6 10-win seasons. Illinois has 5 all time, right? And they're always competitive in the Big Ten. They're always going to bowl games, and they're always producing NFL players. It's a reasonable goal. Like, I know Ohio State, Michigan, you'd love to be them. Let's get to a certain step, and that is sustained success. That's why this season, Joey, is so important, and why we talk about adding the talent that they are, because you need that kind of talent to sustain this kind of success.
Yeah, being Iowa, being Wisconsin isn't, for a while, it's like, hey, go be Minnesota in that conversation as well. And, just you got to climb the Big Ten ladder to get there. And, man, being Iowa is no insult. That's a good – and like, if the college football playoff had been around prior to that, man, you're talking a team that could have been in there a time or two. So
they're already in the 14 playoff one time. So yeah, they would have been a regular, participant in that. Just like
absolutely. So yeah, being Iowa is no slight to being Iowa. That's a pretty good place to be. And look, Brett Bielema obviously played there. He's seen that program. I don't think anyone would be offended saying, "Hey, look at new Iowa or another version of Iowa." That's all right. Iowa wins a lot of football games.
And you can make a pitch that Illinois could have a higher ceiling because of where they are, right? Like where they're situated and the talent that is in their state. So that's what it's all about. All right. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Thank you for everyone that joined us on our live podcast on this Thursday morning. We appreciate you. Before you get out of here, hit that like button, subscribe to us, and hit that notifications bell. If you're listening on the podcast, give us a follow, rating, review, wherever you get your podcasts. We are loaded at IlliniInquirer.com, and we will have plenty more. Joey and I talked with the coaches of each King Liggins and Nasir Rankin. So we'll have Coach Speaks on those. We'll have more of the fallout analysis and what's ahead for Illinois at Illini Inquirer. But for Joey Wagner, for Allen Trieu, thank you to Allen. We appreciate you guys listening. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.